hidden for centuries, scorched by fire, and silenced by sword, contained a key to spiritual freedom so profound, the Church declared war to extinguish it. In the rugged mountains of southern France, cloaked in mist and silence, once walked a group of mystics known as the Cathars, keepers of a gnosis so pure, so radically liberating, it threatened the very foundations of religious power. To their persecutors, they were heretics. To those who listened, they were bearers of a truth too dangerous for the world to accept. These were no ordinary believers. The Cathars saw the material world as a prison of illusion, a realm forged not by a benevolent God, but by a darker architect, a false demiurge who kept humanity trapped in cycles of suffering and ignorance. They rejected the hierarchy of the Church, the rituals of power, and the dogmas of fear. Instead, they taught direct communion with the divine, inner purification, and a path of radical simplicity that echoed the whispers of the earliest Gnostics and Eastern sages. But this path came at a cost. In the 13th century, a crusade unlike any other was launched, not to claim new lands, but to erase a wisdom that could not be controlled. Towns were razed, libraries destroyed, and thousands were slaughtered in the name of orthodoxy. The Cathars vanished, or so it seemed. Yet their teachings did not die. Fragments of their wisdom remain, scattered through rare manuscripts, folk memory, and the persistent hum of something deeper, something eternal. In this video, we will uncover the forbidden teachings of the Cathars, not as dry history, but as living truths meant for those who are ready to see beyond the veil. We'll explore who the Cathars really were, what they believed, and why their vision of reality was so threatening. We'll dive into the metaphysical foundations of their doctrine, the dualism between light and matter, the illusion of worldly power, and the sacred process of inner purification. We'll then bring this ancient wisdom into the present, with practices and insights you can apply to your own spiritual path. So, light a candle, take a breath, and prepare to descend into a forgotten world, where truth was whispered in secret, and the soul was seen not as something to be saved, but as something that had never been lost. To understand the Cathars is to walk a perilous path through the hidden corridors of history, where truth is often cloaked in myth and where victors rewrote what they could not destroy. They called themselves the good people, bons hommes, and saw their mission not as rebellion, but as remembrance. The Cathar movement emerged in the 11th and 12th centuries in the Languedoc region of southern France, a land of troubadours, stone fortresses, and deep spiritual ferment. But their roots stretched far deeper, reaching back to the earliest Gnostic sects of the first centuries after Christ. Gnosticism, a mystical stream that once flowed parallel to early Christianity, taught that the world was not created by the true God, but by a lesser being, the demiurge. This figure, often equated with the God of the Old Testament, was seen as a blind artificer who mistook himself for the source of all, imprisoning divine sparks, souls, in flesh and matter. To the Cathars, the parallels were clear. They too saw the world as fundamentally flawed, not through human sin, but by cosmic distortion. The soul was not fallen, it was kidnapped, and salvation, therefore, was not found in blood sacrifice or ecclesiastical rituals, but in remembering one's true origin beyond this world. This sharply diverged from the dominant Christian theology of the time. The Roman Church claimed exclusive access to grace through sacraments, hierarchy, and obedience. But the Cathars denied the Church's authority altogether. They rejected baptism with water, the Eucharist, and the worship of the crucifix. To them, Christ was not God incarnate in flesh, but a spiritual emissary who never truly entered the corrupt world of matter. His death on the cross was not a necessary atonement, but a tragedy, orchestrated by the powers of this world. This was not merely theological heresy, it was spiritual revolution. Even more radical was their rejection of worldly power. The Cathars refused to take oaths, denied the legitimacy of war, and saw all material accumulation, including church wealth and priestly status, as a form of bondage. They lived simply, often in poverty, and practiced strict asceticism. The most devout among them, the perfecti, were celibate, vegan, and lived lives of contemplation, healing, and non-violence. But they were not isolationists. They moved among the people, healing the sick, teaching, and offering spiritual initiation in the form of the consolamentum, a sacred rite said to restore the soul's direct link to the divine. These teachings attracted not just the poor, but nobles, scholars, and even clergy disillusioned with church corruption. Entire towns embraced Catharism as a way of life. At its peak, it wasn't a fringe movement. It was a flourishing, decentralized spiritual society. That's when the hammer fell. In 1208, after the murder of a papal envoy, an act the Cathars themselves never endorsed, Pope Innocent III launched the Albigensian Crusade. What followed was one of the bloodiest internal purges in Christian history. Over 2 decades, Cathar strongholds like Béziers and Carcassonne were besieged. Men, women, and children were slaughtered indiscriminately. The infamous phrase, "Kill them all, God will know his own," was spoken by a papal legate during this time. It captured the brutal logic of a church defending its power by annihilating its challengers. Even after the war ended, the Inquisition hunted down the remaining Cathars with merciless efficiency. Their texts were burned, their names were erased, and yet the light they carried did not go out. Why were they feared so much? Because they dared to say that you do not need permission to know the divine. Because they taught that within you burns a flame not kindled by any institution. Because they remembered a secret the world had tried to forget, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all, and that light lives within you. To grasp the Cathar worldview is to shift your very perception of reality, to see the world not as it appears, but as it truly is beneath the veil. Their doctrine was not merely a list of theological propositions. It was a metaphysical map, a radical reframing of existence itself. At the center of Cathar belief was duality, but not the kind found in simple good versus evil stories. Theirs was a cosmic dualism, echoing ancient Gnosticism, Persian Zoroastrianism, and even certain strands of Eastern mysticism. According to the Cathars, 2 principles governed the universe: the God of light, the true source of all spirit, and the prince of this world, a counterfeit creator who fashioned the material realm as a prison. Imagine it like this. You are a flame encased in glass. The glass is your body, your desires, your conditioned mind, the structures of matter that weigh you down. But the flame, that is your true nature, radiant, eternal, unbound. The Cathars taught that every human being carries a fragment of the divine, a spark of the true light, trapped in the physical world through a deception of immense scale. The material universe, with its suffering, impermanence, and decay, was not the handiwork of the true God, but of a false architect. This demiurge created the illusion of life to ensnare souls and feed off their entrapment in flesh and desire. This is why the Cathars denied the incarnation. They could not accept that the perfect, formless God of light would descend into corrupted matter. To them, Christ was a docetic being, an immaterial messenger who appeared in human form only to awaken souls from their slumber. He did not die to redeem sin, but to reveal the system that enslaved us. Think of it like this. The Cathars did not believe we were born in sin. They believed we were born into forgetting. Their gospel was not one of guilt and penance, but of remembrance. To awaken meant to pierce through the illusions of this world, the seductions of power, wealth, flesh, and fear, and to recall who you truly are, a being of light, fallen like a star from the celestial heights, now seeking the way home. But the journey inward was no easy path. The world, as the Cathars saw it, was a labyrinth. Every attachment, every indulgence, every false authority was another thread binding the soul to the wheel of reincarnation. a concept they accepted and integrated into their theology. Unlike Orthodox Christianity, which taught a single lifetime followed by judgment, the Cathars believed in the transmigration of souls. Until the spirit was purified, it would return again and again, caught in the snares of matter. Liberation, then, required radical inner discipline. It required gnosis, direct inner knowing, not belief, but awakening. The perfecti, or perfected ones, were those who had pierced the illusion. They underwent the consolamentum, a sacred rite that fused baptism, ordination, and spiritual illumination into one. This wasn't a symbolic gesture. It was a mystical transference, a death to the world and a rebirth into the realm of spirit. Once initiated, the perfecti were said to live beyond duality. They renounced meat, sexual activity, and all forms of violence, believing that indulgence in such things re-entangled the soul in material karma. Yet they did not judge the common people. Instead, they offered guidance, healing, and example, quiet lighthouses in a darkened world. This path may seem extreme by modern standards, but it wasn't rooted in rejection. It was rooted in remembrance. The Cathars did not seek to escape the world out of fear. They sought to transcend it out of love for the light they remembered. And this remembering was not just personal, it was cosmic. The Cathars believed that at the end of the great cycle, when all souls were finally liberated, the material world would be dissolved like a bad dream. The light would gather its fragments and return to the source, and the false creation would vanish like mist before the sun. This was their apocalypse, not a fiery judgment, but a radiant reunion. But how does one begin such a journey? What steps must be taken to awaken this gnosis? And how can the ancient path of the Cathars speak to our modern thirst for truth? To the Cathars, truth was not something given. It was something remembered. And remembrance required the shattering of illusions so deeply woven into daily life, they felt indistinguishable from reality. The Cathar path was not for the faint of heart. It required a willingness to see through the very fabric of the world, not with contempt, but with clarity. Their teachings weren't about condemning the physical out of hatred for the body. They saw matter as a kind of enchanted mirror. Beautiful, yes, but capable of seducing the soul into forgetting its own radiance. To awaken, one had to discern the difference between what was of the light and what was of the world. This discernment was central to Cathar gnosis. It was not about abstract belief. It was about inner knowing, born of silence, discipline, and lived experience. One might think of it like tuning an instrument. The soul, once clouded by noise, becomes capable of vibrating with divine harmony again. The perfecti, those who had attained this state, were said to embody this harmony. They were not considered better than others. In fact, humility was their mark, but they had made the inward turn and followed it to its end. Their lives became pure vessels of the light, and their presence alone was said to awaken remembrance in others. Initiation into this path was marked by a sacred rite known as the consolamentum, but this was no ordinary ceremony. It was neither theatrical nor symbolic. It was mystical, dangerous even, for to receive the consolamentum was to die to the world. There are whispers among certain esoteric circles that the consolamentum was not just a ritual, it was an energetic transmission, a passing of flame from soul to soul. The initiate would fast, pray, and prepare for days. Then, in absolute stillness, the laying on of hands by a perfect would serve as a key, a trigger, to unlock memory encoded deep in the soul's fabric. The Cathars believed that this rite aligned the initiate's soul with the vibration of the higher realms, breaking the chain of reincarnation and preparing the soul for its final return to the light. Once received, the initiate was expected to live as a perfect, a life of radical integrity, non-violence, and detachment from worldly ambition. This might seem harsh, but there was a practical wisdom beneath it. They saw how the structures of power corrupted. They witnessed how war, greed, and blind obedience led to suffering. The Cathars offered an alternative, not utopia, but a sacred countercurrent, a way of living that refused to feed the world's madness. Even their cosmology was revolutionary. The Cathars believed that angels and archons, the spiritual forces behind the veil, could be of two kinds. Some were guides of liberation, others were jailers, cloaked in light but serving the demiurge. Discernment was essential, even in the unseen. This idea of a deceptive light echoes through other mystical traditions as well. The Sufi warning of the Nafs al-Amara, the Buddhist concept of Mara, the illusion of form, or the Gnostic tales of archontic forces that manipulate human perception. In all of them, one truth rings clear: not all that glitters is divine. To walk the Cathar path meant confronting these illusions, both external and internal. Ego, pride, carnal indulgence, even attachment to suffering itself. These were seen as chains forged not by fate, but by forgetting. To break them required not violence, but vigilance. And yet, the Cathars were not nihilists. Their teachings overflowed with quiet compassion. They believed in healing, in inner peace, in the radiant beauty of a soul aligned with its source. Their ethics were rooted not in dogma, but in love. A love that transcended form and pointed always toward the eternal. In the end, the Cathars were not trying to escape life. They were trying to awaken from a dream mistaken for life. The final goal? Not heaven as a place, but light as a state. How do we apply the wisdom of a persecuted medieval sect in a world of smartphones, skyscrapers, and existential overload? The Cathars lived in stone villages, lit candles for prayer, and renounced the world's enticements to awaken the soul. We live in an age of noise, distraction, and algorithmic addiction, but the essence of their path, the art of spiritual remembering, is more relevant than ever. The Cathars understood that awakening begins with discernment. In today's world, that means learning to perceive what feeds your light and what feeds your illusion. 1. Begin with silence. The Cathars practiced contemplation, not through ritualistic prayer, but through presence. Start with a simple daily practice. 10 minutes in stillness. No phone, no agenda. Just you and your breath. Listen to the silence beneath thought. Over time, this develops the inner ear, the capacity to hear what the mind forgets. 2. Refine your consumption. Cathars were vegetarians, not out of moral superiority, but because they believed consumption binds the soul. You don't have to become ascetic overnight, but begin to notice, what are you feeding yourself? Physically, mentally, emotionally. Try this. For 3 days, eliminate anything that induces craving or dullness. Processed foods, sensational media, gossip, judgment. Watch what arises in its absence. That discomfort, that silence, that's the beginning of remembrance. 3. Practice ethical non-attachment. The Cathars rejected violence, excess, and hierarchy, not out of rebellion, but because those systems obscure spiritual clarity. In your own life, ask, where am I clinging? To identity? To approval? To status? Then choose one small attachment and loosen your grip, not to punish yourself, but to create space for the light to emerge. 4. Rediscover the consolamentum within. While the literal rite may be lost to time, its essence lives on the inner turning, the soul's reconnection with Source. Create your own sacred initiation. It could be a quiet walk in nature where you declare your intention to remember, or a personal vow whispered before sleep. I choose light over illusion. I choose remembering over forgetting. Do this with reverence. You are reigniting an ancient fire. 5. Live as a vessel of light. The perfecti were not saints. They were reminders, living mirrors. You don't need robes or vows to carry light. In daily moments, how you speak, how you respond, how you forgive, you become either a window or a wall. Ask yourself often, am I reflecting light or absorbing shadow? 6. Watch for the archons in modern disguise. The Cathars warned of unseen forces that mimic truth. Today, these come cloaked as ideologies, movements, or even spiritual teachers. How do you discern? Ask, does this path encourage fear or love? Control or liberation? Ego or soul? Genuine light never demands your allegiance. It invites your awakening. 7. Create a fellowship of remembrance. The Cathars lived in community, not out of necessity, but out of resonance. Find, or build, a circle of kindred souls. You don't need a monastery. Even two people meeting in truth create a sacred space. Speak of soul things, share dreams, guard one another's light. These steps are not rules, they are reminders. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to remember that you were never broken. The Cathar teachings, though scorched by time, still whisper, you are light, dreaming of matter. You are free, pretending to be bound. Each time you choose truth over comfort, stillness over noise, love over illusion, you walk the Cathar path, not in their robes, but in your own light. Centuries have passed since the fires burned at Montsegur, where the last Cathar stronghold fell and over 200 souls walked willingly into the flames. To the world, they died as heretics. But to those who remember, they ascended as keepers of a deeper truth, one that no sword, no decree, no inquisition could extinguish, because the truth they carried was never theirs to own. It was, and still is, yours to remember. The Cathars taught that this world is a shadow play, a dream mistaken for reality, and that true salvation comes not from external authority, but from awakening the divine flame already within you. They lived in defiance of fear, in devotion to light, and in service to the soul's eternal path home. Today, their whispers return not as doctrine, but as a call, not to escape the world, but to see through it, not to follow blindly, but to know deeply, not to be saved, but to remember that you were never truly lost. In their fall, the Cathars planted seeds, seeds of gnosis, of quiet resistance, of luminous clarity, and those seeds are sprouting again, in those who meditate instead of medicate, who question instead of conform, who seek the inner temple rather than the outer throne. If you've felt that the world is not what it seems, if you've sensed that your soul belongs to a light not found in books or buildings, if you've heard the faint echo of a truth too dangerous to speak aloud, then perhaps you were always meant to find this path. And now, it is time to walk it. Let their legacy live not in memory alone, but in your presence, your choices, your awakening. Become what they died to protect, a soul unbound, a vessel of light, a living reminder that even in the darkest times, truth cannot be burned. If this awakens something in you, reflect, reclaim your silence, seek the light within, and remember, you do not need permission to awaken, only the courage to remember who you are. If you found this journey meaningful, share it. Comment below with what resonated most. And as always, walk gently, seek deeply, and shine without fear. The light remembers you.